I would say that what distinguishes, perhaps we were getting into the question of what, people always come and they say, well, what's the difference? What's psychology and what's psychiatry and even um, under the field of therapy. Therapy is a huge umbrella, and we're one segment of it. We're psychodynamic, which means that we work with the unconscious. And so the way I would describe it is, maybe we use the iceberg metaphor, and the very top part of the iceberg is visible, but the rest is submerged. So in our consciousness, we might seek something. We might seek to have healthy relationships. We might I don't know, seek all those things that people traditionally want. But then somehow we find mates that aren't the right mates for us. We find that we react to people in ways we don't understand. So what our work strives to do is understand what the unconscious beliefs, what the unconscious assumptions, what lies in the unconscious that sort of behaves like an undertow. We're aiming to go this way and something is pulling us back this direction. So that's what psychodynamic work hopes to achieve, is to make more of the unconscious conscious to us, so that we in essence have more of ourselves to live out of, more awareness of ourselves to live out of. I tend to believe that, we as human beings, we've gotten ourselves so complex. Our brains have gotten so complex. We've, in essence, become so smart that it's very difficult being human. It's a real challenge to be human. And there's so much growing that happens in the process of becoming human. Like, I certainly hope that who I am today is not the same person I will be in terms of, I hope I keep growing. So I'm a different person in 5 years, and there are layers of me that keep being uncovered and lived out of. So I don't tend to think in terms of mental illness, although there are certainly people who suffer terribly from imbalances that, thank goodness, we can remedy a lot through pharmacology and such. Mm-hmm. But by and large, the people I see, the people who do psychodynamic therapy, are people who come in and we say they've got a presenting symptom. They're having a challenge with their mother-in-law or their children, and then through that, there's a line, Leonard Cohen's anthem. He says, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And there's a way in which through that crisis, whether it be a marital crisis, a crisis in parenting, that the regular defense system, the way that we get around in the world, kind of cracks open a little bit, and then it allows us to go into our internal world and start living perhaps more authentically. So I tend to think it's always about growth. It allows my clients to grow in a way that they may not have done if they had been able just to go on without that level of exploration, right? So when people say to me, "What do you work with the most? Do you work with depression? Do you work with OCD? Do you work with?" And I say, well, no, each person is their own. I don't talk about people for the symptoms they are. For all of it, I see those as symptoms. So what I hope to do with each person is get to try to understand, what are those symptoms trying to tell you? How do we listen to the symptoms so we can get to what it needs in the world, what needs to happen for you? I think that becoming a therapist was something that only entered in my mind, in my 30s, my early 30s, maybe my late 20s. But now when I look back upon, my educational interests and what fascinated me when I was in school, even when I was a child, I recognized that I was always I always wanted to know what was going on in people, sort of the way they might have behaved in ways that were really puzzling, were against their best interest, in ways to a child's eyes was really quite, really quite baffling. So I realized that I was really interested in that. And I was also academically interested in literature, which I think was very much an exploration of people's internal worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And that in my early 20s, sort of this interest in internal processes, perhaps some puzzlement over what I was doing with my own life that sort of puzzled me, I ventured on my own therapy. And it was something that I just started, and I thought, well, I'll do this for a little while, see where it takes me. And I just became so fascinated with it, so incredibly fascinated by the world that opened up for me, that I decided in my early 30s that I wanted to embark on this, which is really as young as you would want someone to be before they actually embark on being a therapist. There's a bit of living that you need to do first before you start the work.